Welcome to those already online. I'm Lisa Fraser from QCOS, and very sorry we were having some last-minute technical difficulties with a new system. This is the first event, of course, QCOS has run on the new system, and we're already learning. So we'll just give it a minute for a few more people to join, given there have been some challenges. That everyone, Carolina, in at the moment?
Yep.
Oh,
Yes,
great.
we have everyone.
Okay. We'll make a start. I expect we'll have some more people joining. We've had a few people with challenges with the webinar link, so we might have people still coming in. So I'd just like to start by acknowledging country. And so QCOS acknowledges the historical injustice of colonisation and dispossession of First Nations peoples and its ongoing impacts and legacies. We're committed to reconciliation, self-determination and opportunity for First Nations peoples as integral steps in achieving equality, opportunity and well-being for all Queenslanders. I'm joining you from Meanjin or Brisbane and respectfully acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal peoples and all First Nations colleagues and friends joining us online today. And please feel free to pop in the chat what country you're coming from today, coming and joining us from today. So just a quick whip through the QCN agenda. And before we get into our main agenda item of the day, which will be a workshop. So we have a 90-minute workshop, as people know, and I just wanted to indicate before we get into the workshop, that for people that are joining us for the first time, so we'll have many people who are familiar with the Quality Collaboration Network, but for those who aren't, the QCN is a long-standing network that QCOS has supported, which was started by the community services sector, and workers wanting to work alongside peers, share resources, knowledge and wisdom about things related, or all things related to quality services. So over time, the network requested that QCOS begin to convene the network and organise speakers and content for the sessions. So I always like to impress, or we always like to impress, that the network belongs to you and the content is driven by you to ensure that it continues to meet your needs. So the first item of the day that we'll be looking at is a workshop, as you all know, Do No Harm, using trauma-informed AI tools in an AI-enabled community services, and I'll talk about that shortly. Then after the workshop, that workshop will go for about 90 minutes. Then we'll want to share some resources and events. So we'll look at child safe standards and reportable conduct scheme webinar that QCOS will be hosting next week. Invite people to participate in a submission engagement session around the Commission of Inquiry into the child safety system. And many of you all know that the timeline for that inquiry has been brought forward. So this is an important engagement session for those it's relevant to. We'll look at QCN meetings for 2026 and share some other workshops, and then talk about any other business, time permitting, at the end of the session. So moving into our workshop for the day, I'd like to take a moment to briefly introduce the workshop and the speakers today. As many of you will know, the QCN identified capacity building in AI literacy as one of the key priorities for 2026 for the network. So in keeping with this priority, we've organised this workshop for you today. So as artificial intelligence becomes more embedded in the way that community organisations are doing their work and designing and delivering services, It, of course, brings enormous opportunity for organisations and for your service users, but it also brings the potential for enormous risk. And some of that risk, as we well know in Australia, can be catastrophic risk to particularly vulnerable people, and we've seen this occur. So if it is not carefully designed and carefully governed, then we have the potential to put people at risk of further harm or traumatisation. So today's workshop is going to introduce the Trauma-Informed AI Assessment Toolkit, which is an innovative, practical resource designed to help community service organisations and others build safe, responsible, AI-enabled services. The toolkit, or the development and design of the toolkit, draws upon trauma-informed principles and also AI audit frameworks. So it provides a structured, collaborative process for reflecting on how AI shapes service user experiences and for developing meaningful service improvement plans in this space. So very importantly, the research team will talk more about this. The toolkit was co-designed with human service providers so that it is grounded in practice, real-world practice, I guess. And my understanding is that that is still evolving, and the team are continuing to work with providers over time and are very keen to engage with community service providers to gain more insight into how it's working and or not working for providers. So I would now like to introduce our speakers. Not all of them on the slide there, but these are the members of the TIAKIT research team. So we have Professor Paul Henman. Today, speaking, we'll have Professor Paul Henman, Aviz Hamid Khan, Dr. Lyndall Sleep, and Subhadip Mitra speaking with us today. And I'll stop speaking in a minute and hand over to the team. So the team, I just want to say the team have graciously agreed, to offer this workshop to the QCN, to have this workshop recorded and to share their PowerPoint presentation with the QCN. So thank you very much, team, for your generosity. So I'm going to stop sharing now and ask the team here to share, and we'll get into the workshop. I do want to say this is an interactive workshop, so please be active in the chat. Any questions, any comments, you can put your hand up, but definitely be active in the chat. All right. Thank you. Over to you. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Lisa, very much for inviting us. And you can see the slides now, can you?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Fabulous. Well, welcome, everyone. Thank you very much. And I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners from where I am and where we all meet. As Lisa kind of introduced the team, I just wanted to say that I'm from the University of Queensland. Avis, you might put your hand up there, from the University of Queensland. Avis is a human-centered design expert. We also have Dr. Lyndall Sleep from the Central Queensland University, working in the Queensland Research Centre for Domestic and Family Violence. And Lyndall works in the intersection of social policy and impact on people and technology, particularly about women and children. And then we have Subhadip Mitra. I can't see him on the screen. And Subhadip was early involved in the project as a research assistant. He's now a PhD student at ANU, and his background is in law. And he's so that's a little bit of a nutshell of who we are. So this project is being funded and has been funded by some grants, including the University of Notre Dame in the US initially, and that was allowed us to employ Subhadip. and is also continuing to be supported by the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for Automated Decision Making in Society. A bit of a mouthful. It's their logos down there on the left-hand side. The Centre of Excellence is funded for 7 years. It's got 2 more years to run, and it involves a multidisciplinary centre, covers about 8 universities across Australia and has links with ACOS, Red Cross, ABC, a number of big bodies in Australia, and over 200 researchers investigating the impact of automated decision making on society. And I lead the social services focus area of that. So this project came out of that work and continues to be part of that work. So I'm really pleased that you were able to share that with you today. So today I just want to, in our workshop, we're going to introduce what TIAKIT is and its purpose of the workshop. We will introduce TIAKIT. We'll get you to have an opportunity to play with it yourself. And then we will interact with the toolkit, thinking about, through a number of case studies to stimulate our thinking about where algorithms or AI may intersect with service delivery. And then we wanted to explore the next steps about, what can you do from here on? So in terms of this introduction, what we wanting to do is to help you appreciate the challenges in using AI. And we want to put a little asterisk after AI because automation is more than just AI, and automation like robo-debt didn't include AI, but can cause a huge amount of trauma. And so when we're talking about AI, we're also talking about other forms of automation in service delivery, etc. And I think it was really important that sometimes this gets missed. Older technology is not seen as harmful, but it is increasingly harmful. And so we need to be aware of automation as well. So we want to give you the capacities today so that you can introduce TIAKIT into your own workplace. And then also, this is an ongoing research project because whilst we develop this, co-designed this with human service professionals such as yourself, we're really keen to see how this impacts on what organisations do and their decision making, and also how this can help organisations understand these kind of issues and navigate them, and how we can improve the TIAKIT to help in that whole process. So I'm going to hand over to Lyndall, who will introduce us to the question of why we're talking about trauma in relation to automation and AI.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to James. He's just re-entered the community after 6 years in prison. No job, no savings, nowhere to go. His first stop is Centrelink for crisis payments, a lifeline designed exactly for this situation. But the computer says no. James's path to this essential support is fraught with barriers that digital transformation has amplified. 6 years incarcerated means an expired driver's license, an outdated medical care card, and no recent bills or bank statements for identity verification. While the world moved online, James's tech skills froze in time. Smartphones, apps, and online portals essential for government services are foreign territory. With no stable housing, digital systems asking for addresses, assuming mail delivery, sending verification codes to phones he can't consistently access, every form designed for stability that incarceration has stripped away. Next slide, please, Paul. So what does James do now? James might simply leave. The combination of technological barriers, bureaucratic complexity, and emotional weight of feeling incompetent or suspicious becomes overwhelming. Walking away feels safer than persisting through systems seemingly designed to exclude him. James's situation reveals how digital transformation, while efficient for many, creates new structural violence for trauma survivors. Assuming everyone has stable housing, reliable technology, current ID, and emotional capacity to navigate complex systems ignores what incarceration, homelessness, or domestic violence actually do to institutional relationships. When we design digital systems without understanding trauma, we risk turning technologies meant to improve access into new forms of exclusion for those needing support most. Next slide, please, Paul. The TIAKIT is designed around 5 key trauma-informed principles that are important for assessing AI-assisted service systems. Our empowerment and choice refer to power sharing and shared decision making, meaning choice for service users regarding how, when, and from whom the services are received, and also about how their personal data is treated. Collaboration refers to the importance of engaging with service users at all stages of the planning, design, delivery, and evaluation of the systems. Trust and transparency means providing meaningful transparency about all aspects of the system, and also the privacy of data to maintain therapeutic confidentiality. Safety is essential. It's essential that the systems do not cause additional harm and that disclosures of trauma are responded to appropriately. It's also important that services do not rely on the service user to disclose their experience of trauma, but are designed with the prevalence of trauma in mind. And finally, intersectionality deals with the issues involving complex interactions of positions of inequality, like colonialism, race, gender, and disability, migration on individuals and communities, and the difficulties our biased digital systems have working with these experiences. Now I'll hand back to Paul, I think, for a walk through the TIAKIT.
Thanks, Lyndall. And the key thing we wanted to get across is too often we focus on technology and its impact that can cause harm, which of course is trauma. But we wanted to also recognize that people who exist and experience trauma fundamentally shapes the way in which they interact with systems that systems are not designed for. And that's what we want to make sure that when we actually design in systems, we're designing as an inclusive system that takes into account where people's situation may be. So as I said, it was co-designed with a series of workshops with human service providers such as yourself. And one of the key things that we needed to emphasize through creating this is a lot of the AI audit tools or the ethical AI focused risk assessment tools focus on the technology itself as a tool. And what we wanted to emphasize is it's not just the tool itself, but it's the tool in situ, the tool that's in location and work with an organization. So our focus of analysis of the toolkit is what we call an AI supported service. And that may be the tool in itself, like a chatbot, but it might also be like a risk assessment tool that has a professional working with in front of it, and the person who's behind the service receiver doesn't know anything about the risk assessment tool. So we wanted to think about this whole ecosystem, and that also means that when we do an evaluation, we're not just considering the technical aspects of the tool, we're thinking about how the organization delivers the service with that tool and the experiences of the service user within that service process. So there will be different domains of the tool that pick up on that. The other important thing is it's designed in a way that can be used within organizations at the beginnings of ideation or design, development, and also deployment and evaluation. So there's no one right time to use it other than now. So it's designed to help the be self-reflective. It's not like an audit like a financial audit where you say you've passed or not passed, you've met the standards like the international standards. It's to say, how can we reflect on what we're doing? Where are we doing well, or where potential weaknesses are? And then how can we invent and work with what those things are? So at a design stage, it might actually help us to say, actually, if we design it this way, we can see the problems. But if we make these tweaks, whether it's a technical tweak, whether it's a service delivery tweak, whether it's a policy tweak, whether it's an information tweak, we actually might improve the safety for people. And it's designed to be within organisations. Now, obviously, organisations come in many shapes and sizes and capacities, but it's designed to be used and encouraged in a multi-stakeholder team, because different people within an organisation will have different expertise. So some will have very clear, like a management, have oversight of the system. Some people at the front line will have good expertise in how that works in the everyday reality, having stakeholder like service delivery representation, and also IT people who might know the IT types of issues. So to answer the questions, you often find that you might need to draw on different parts of the organisation. It's also designed on a desktop as a general browser. It doesn't work on a phone, so we recommend using it on a browser. And the data is stored on your device where your browser data is stored. There is no security risks to you. We're not passing anything to the cloud or anything like that. We don't see anything. You are totally in control. And we've actually had these conversations with Service Australia so that we be reassured of the security risks of them. At the core is a whole series of questions. There's 10 core critical consideration questions, and then there's 60 domain questions that focus on different domains. And each question speaks to different forms of the 5 trauma-informed principles. And then there's also some specific AI or algorithm related questions if you're using particular types of things like a chatbot or a risk assessment tool. There are specific questions related to that. So what I wanted just to do is have everyone have an opportunity just to see whether they can do that in their browser. The QR code's there for use for your phone. You can see it on your phone, but it's easy to use on your browser. If you just type in TIAKIT.com, TIAKIT.com, I can put that in. Someone can put that into the chat, then you can just click on the link. And what we'll do is have a little bit of a walkthrough. Avis will just share with us a walkthrough of the process of it, but you could also do it on your own computers. So we'll just let you do that for a minute. Whilst you're doing that, TIAKIT, TIAKIT.com, very simple. And this is the overarching structure. On the left-hand side of your screen, if you've got it there, you will see these particular icons or these particular topic areas. So the home page. The second one is the file, so you can save the data. The thing is that you can't have everybody using, multiple people use the tool at once in your organisation. We'll talk a little bit more about how to work it with the file at the end of the session. Then there's the organisational context. Then the assessment was where the main questions are, results and next steps. And we're going to go through those things as we work through. But please put in the question in the chat if you're not having if you are having difficulty or any questions that you need to raise. I'll hand it now over to Avis, who you're going to share your screen, are you, Avis?
Yep. Thanks, Paul. And like everyone mentioned before, really great to be here today. So basically, when you when you log into TIAKIT, you are greeted with this screen, and this is basically just giving you a bit of an overview in terms of the background of the toolkit. And you only need to do this, I believe, the first time. So I'm just going to accept the terms of agreements. And then you're greeted with the home screen. Now here you've got a dashboard that you can sort of click on and sort of move through different parts of the tool, but that's sort of just giving you like an overview and another way of navigating through the tool. You've got the basics around the principles laid out, and then some other details in terms of just the ways in which the tool has been set up. Like Paul mentioned, that you've got a file function here. I'll walk you through how to sort of export and import content a bit later. The first part of this toolkit is the organizational context. And here, the idea of this section is to get you to reflect on what is the actual space within which you're using TIAKIT, and what are the systems that are in place. So it sort of walks you through your organization's values, the objective of the service that you're trying to deliver. And then it's sort of set up as a form which you can fill out just to everyone who is sort of engaging with this toolkit is on the same page, and you're sort of actually being transparent about your different perspectives. And in the last section, you can also mention what are the different types of algorithms you're using. Now, as you sort of click these, they will have implications for downstream in terms of the types of questions that you get. So there, as Paul mentioned earlier, there are certain sections that we have sort of identified in collaboration with service providers that are critical and that should be assessed regardless of the rest. But then you've got domain-specific questions that highlight focus on particular areas of the service. But then these are additional sets of questions that come into play when you actually are, let's say, using a chatbot within your system. So that'll sort of pop up a few more questions. The core of the toolkit is the assessment page. And here, as I sort of browse down, you'll see a list of questions. Now, on the top here, you've got a navigation panel that gives you a little bit of options in terms of filtering. So we've the principles that we had, you can organize questions based on that. You can have priorities set up as you're sort of filling out the questions as well. And you've also got a progress bar both for the section. So this here is sort of just giving us an indication in terms of we've not really filled out anything. And then at the bottom here, you've got the overall progress bar. So just in order to illustrate how this works, you can click on a question and it'll sort of give you a few options. Now we've identified like the framework that we're using here is somewhat similar to a Likert scale. So you've got a not at all to some extent to a great extent in terms of your response. And based on your response, you'll also notice that it's color coded. So it's meant to use a traffic light signal system. And then you can mark questions as high priorities. Maybe you need more information, so you want to revisit a question. Or in a particular case, you think that this particular question doesn't really apply to my particular context. Now, again, as Paul mentioned, this is not meant to be an audit tool, so to speak. It's more to be reflective and dialogic. So the idea here is that you can fill out give a basic response to the question, but then also provide evidence and an action plan for yourselves to work towards, and that pops up later in the results as well. You can also navigate through the questions over here, so like through that button down there, and just popping in some random answers here. You'll notice that the overall color of the card has also changed to reflect your response. The idea here is to sort of give you a snapshot of what your overall responses are, and then that sort of can be revisited as well. There's also a quick way of doing this. If let's say you just wanted to scan through the questions, not really get into the detail initially, you can sort of just click the color, the little pop out here in order to respond. You can also mark something as a priority or something as not applicable, depending on how you feel. You'll also notice that this bar down here is changing, and it's giving you a tally as well. So 5 out of 10 of the critical consideration questions have been responded to. And yeah, so that's essentially the core of the toolkit, I suppose. We've got results and next steps, but we'll sort of revisit that a bit later. But just to give you a bit of an overview, you sort of get a summary, and then you can also get a work order, but I'll walk you through that a bit later down in the workshop. Anything else, Paul?
Vis, can you just mention the 4 domains as well while we're going through?
Yes, absolutely. So we've got the critical consideration. So like I mentioned, these are the core questions that span different areas of your service. But over here, you've also got a caret function that can sort of pull collapse certain parts of the toolkit. So the domains that we have are human algorithm interaction. And as you hover over these, it'll also give you a brief overview of what the section is. And then, so algorithm systems, service user engagement and involvement, service processes, procedures, and plans. And then down here, like I mentioned earlier, when you check the chat box in the organizational context, it'll open up a few other questions. So because I selected chatbot, it also opened up questions about a chatbot and then also questions about goal-driven optimization. And then these are the other hidden sections that we didn't select, but you can also add those here if you think that they are important. Yeah. Any questions or anything that needs further clarity?
So what we're going to do now is just go through a few questions to get people thinking about this, and you get to kind of simulate the kind of experience that you might have in your organization. So I'm going to hand it over to Vis and before I share the screen. Okay.
That's me, Paul. Hi everyone, I am Suvradip. I will take you through some quick vignettes and case studies that are around sort of similar programs that have similar sort of algorithmic programs that have been used in social service contexts. And we will have a quick Slido whereby you can answer a question. So you'll be given 3 options to answer a question, or 4 options. And then we can discuss each case afterwards. So the first one is an instance of in 2022, the National Eating Disorders Association introduced a chatbot called Tessa. The goal of the chatbot was to sort of be available 24/7 to help service users build resilience and self-awareness by introducing coping skills. So it was kind of like an educational chatbot. And when they were doing this, they decided to shut down their staff helpline to let the chatbot function on its own. The chatbot was widely criticized and ultimately was taken down because it provided problematic advice that further promoted eating disorders. So there was advice about how to safely go on a diet and reduce calories and what types of foods would reduce calories. So there was all sorts of advice that the chatbot gave that were obviously perpetuating diet culture and weren't very safe. So Avis, do you mind clicking or pull and bringing up the Slido link?
So do you want to ask the question? So
Yeah. So the question that we have here, so this is a question from the toolkit, which is, can the service user choose to interact with the human? So in what I've said, I've sort of given a hint to that, but you may also, one of the options is I don't know. So if that's the case, we can also talk about what we need to do if that's the answer. So have a go. Let us know in the chat if you're having any issues doing the Slido, answering the questions.
we'd really encourage people to have a go and respond to the question. If just have a guess, to what extent can the service user choose to interact with a human?
You can use the QR code or copy the link to get to the Slido. Are people able to access it? Or are they anyone having tech issues? Yeah. Paul, would you mind putting the link in the chat?
Oh, okay. Oh, that's now happening.
Yeah, if we put it in the chat. Oh, here we go. The answers have come up.
So Rajeep, would you like
Yep.
to invite people to just say why they chose the one they chose?
Yeah, so could people put in the chat some sort of reasoning for why they pick those answers? And then we can have a discussion, short discussion. I think quite a lot of people have answered. Yeah, so maybe if you put in the chat. Yeah, essentially, so that's the situation. The call center was shut down. So what that meant was, essentially, as most people have said, there wasn't an option to interact with the human. So in this case, I told you what the answer was, but in reality, that might not be known to you. So what are some of the concerns then that we can think of with taking away the human option? So yeah, so maybe if people put in the chat what are possible concerns with taking away human alternative. I'll just put a question in the chat.
Is it worth inviting people to speak, or is that we've got so many people that becomes chaos?
Lisa, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's okay. If people would rather actually speak, just pop your hand up. And certainly, if you don't want to speak, then keep putting the answers in the chat. There's some fantastic stuff in there.
Yeah, we're getting some really, really good answers in the chat. Yeah, I think the answers in the chat show that people have really rich experience providing this kind of service, and it really shows that a lot of the problems that come up with algorithms don't actually require necessarily that much knowledge of the algorithm itself to answer, because the answers that people are giving were in fact a lot of the problems that did come up. So I'll just go through some of them. I'll just have a look at the answers and just summarize. So I think there's a few key points that have been raised. So first, a really important point is there's potential distrust in services because having access to a human is really important for people to feel safe and build trust, which are two of the trauma-informed principles that we talked about earlier. Another issue is the personalization of advice because everyone has their own circumstance, and a chatbot, in this case, this didn't even use AI in any meaningful way initially, but then it started using generative AI without the knowledge of the organization deploying it. It was actually the third-party provider that suddenly updated and started using generative AI. So the answers were actually quite unpredictable, and that's what caused the problem. So secondly, there's issues with answers that are potentially unsafe because they, as we all know, having had experience probably now with generative AI systems, they can often have answers that are not accurate, or they can go a bit rogue, which can be really risky in this kind of context where we need to think about safety. A third point that people have raised in the chat is it ignores individual circumstances. Yeah, we talked about that. And it is, yes, it can be dehumanizing as well. So using a chatbot to give people assistance in a situation, in a really vulnerable situation like this, can be considered dehumanizing, and human interaction in that situation can be really, really meaningful. Another really important point is usually so often there's this techno-solutionism idea where it's thought that as soon as a technology is introduced, it's going to perform seamlessly and there's not going to be any issues. But often there are issues that show up, and there needs to be human oversight over technology. And that's something that's really, really important. So even if a call center provider, call center helpline staff member is using the chatbot on their end, if they're having human oversight over the chatbot, then that can be really, really meaningful as well. So that's sort of the key points that have come up, which are, I think, yeah, really valuable. So should we move over to the next case study?
I think just before you move on, Supradeep, I think one of the things you said about the updating of the chatbot from a predefined one to a generative AI one is a really important point, because it highlights that not necessarily the new technology is better. The reality was that the previous chatbot has been designed and built for the specifics of that environment. And so there still can be really important uses of chatbots that can be safe if they're designed well. And this is the whole thing that it needs to think about, well, what might be the different forms of technological solutions, so some of those debates and discussions are always be aware of the fancy new technology may not be the best solution.
Yes, and one point I missed from the chat that someone made was that there's no way to look at distress, which is also a really important point, because a chatbot like that can't be responsive necessarily to the emotions that are being felt by the service users, whereas a human helpline staff member could be potentially. This was also really damaging because a lot of people lost their jobs, which is also a concern where there's precarity in a particular sector, and people were laid off without sort of much notice, but ultimately a lot of them had to be hired back because the chatbot trial had to be cancelled. So now let's talk about the next one. Yes, definitely a shocking change management issue. Just referring to the chat there. So this one's about AI-generated deepfake video of a deceased gunshot victim, which was created by a family in Arizona to address the perpetrator at sentencing hearing. So most people would be familiar. There's often a victim impact statement that's given in sentencing hearings, but in cases where the victim is deceased, that obviously isn't possible. So in this case, there were images, recordings, and videos of the relevant deceased individual that were put together to create this AI deepfake. And then based on generative AI, they gave a victim impact statement using the persona of the relevant deceased individual. So this was the first known instance of this kind of use. The question we ask here is, are there supportive processes for responding to harm or distress caused by the algorithmic system? Yeah.
So for all the questions in the TIAKIT, they all start to what extent does, or what extent do, or what extent can.
The point of that is to avoid binary checklist answers and provide a spectrum and a discursive mode of answering the questions that prompt critical reflection. Because the real concern is having a checklist approach to these kind of tools, and we want to prompt discussion with it rather than having a checklist. We'll just wait for a few more people to answer.
I think that's a really interesting question there about who the service user is. And I think that is something that we should also acknowledge, that in the case where you're having a deepfake video being presented as a victim statement that is targeted towards the perpetrator and sort of addressing them, who are we actually looking at? And I think that's something that is one of the points that we've seen before as well when we've trialed the toolkit, that it's for us to sort of think about these different perspectives, and then based on that, take a particular stance. But yeah, it could be the family members, it could be the perpetrator, it could be the person that was actually putting it together, and maybe there are family members that don't agree with this type of system.
Yeah, and often it won't be clear who the service user is as well, because algorithmic systems are often adopted in the back end, or they're adopted in particular situations where, as Viz said, there are multiple stakeholders as well, which is why our toolkit is designed at the start to prompt reflection on who the relevant stakeholders are. So it's really good that you're asking those kind of questions. And I think the question does relate to the victim statement case study. Yeah. Yeah.
So the other point about this one is that also highlights that this tool is being brought into a particular organisation where there's already organisational practices around that, so the court, etc. And so there may be support services already in there that is a standard part of the court, and that then means like, well, you're asking questions about the organisation that pre-exists, and it could be you have all of those supporting places already, so that the tool in itself is not necessarily creating those problems. If there is no support, that it's actually perhaps there's no support regardless that could be addressed.
Yeah, so in this case, so most people have answered not at all, which is accurate, because I didn't actually tell you whether there were these processes for responding to harm or distress. I think some people have answered to some extent, and I think that's because they would have drawn on regular court processes that do exist in these kind of situations to provide support for trauma, harm, or distress in courtroom proceedings. So often it will be the case in these kind of situations where you don't know the answer, and it's about thinking about all the stakeholders that are potentially involved in the process and who you need to go to get the answers. So in this case, it may be court administrative officers. Do you mind just going back, Avis? Oh, Paul. Yeah, thank you. Maybe administrative officers, etc. So what are the possible sources of harm or distress that could be caused? Could people put in some answers about that? What are some possible ways that harm or distress could be caused by this?
So Pradeep, I don't think we have time. I think we leave some more time at the end for the discussion. So at the end, so I think we just move through the next questions quickly so that we have that chance for more feedback. Is that all right?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So yes, re-traumatization of the family, someone has said that's a really big one, because especially if there's family members that weren't involved in generating the system. So if you can keep thinking about it, and there could be lots of other ways that these kind of issues can come up. So next one, Paul.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right, about the threat to legal systems as well. Okay, so this one is about, this is actually becoming quite common practice, which is doctors, psychologists, or social work practitioners, all sorts of practitioners using AI to take notes. And this can be a really beneficial development, because often people are quite time pressed, and it can help provide better services, but there's also potential ethical concerns. So Paul, do you want to go to the question? So one of the questions we have in our toolkit here is, are service users aware that an algorithmic system is being used? If we put up the Slido.
That's an interesting point in the chat. I was talking to someone about this particular topic, and they were refused service because the GP actually refused to turn off the AI.
Which one's that? In the chat, did you say?
Yeah, so about the fact that a doctor's asking, can they record
Oh, can
the
they
session
record?
as opposed to using AI?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so looks like we've got some answers, and I think people, even though I didn't tell you in this case what was happening, I think people have relied on their personal experience to answer. And I think, well, thanks. I think it shows that to some extent there is information being provided, but there's a number of concerns that could arise with this kind of system, even if service users are aware that system like this is being used. So I'll just mention some of them. So one possible problem could be that even if the system is being used and people do say yes, because they feel like they don't have meaningful alternatives, because this sort of system, in use of this sort of system is becoming more standardized. So people may not want to disclose as much information if they don't have trust in protecting privacy, or whether there could be potential discrimination issues with the AI system, potential linguistic issues with how the information is being transcribed. So that's the first thing. Secondly, there could also be concerns around general trust of the doctor, whether the doctor or the relevant service provider is actually listening. So even if they know this is being used, providing meaningful consent goes beyond just knowledge and transparency. It's about thinking through what are the alternatives, how can this actually affect the quality of the service, how can it affect trust, how can it affect empowerment of the service user. So it's thinking through all of these different things. I'll just have a quick look at the chat.
Yeah.
Lyndall?
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Superdeep. Also, while sort of awareness and understanding is essential for consent, just somebody telling you that they're using AI isn't consent either. So there needs to be a real alternative and the ability for patients and clients to say, no, I actually don't want you to record and still receive the service and the support.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people have noted that some patients might agree without understanding the potential risks or knowing that they can decline. So I think this would very much depend on the type of patient, especially if you're thinking of patients that have experienced mental health challenges, etc. They have previous distrust of the system. They might find it difficult to meaningfully say no in this kind of situation. Okay, next one, Paul. Some really good comments in the chat. So this is really, really great, everyone. So this one is a Queensland trial that started in 2021, where the police were trialing AI to identify high-risk domestic violence offenders before any offense occurred. So they were using their existing Q Prime database to go through and proactively anticipate crimes that may occur, and then knocking on doors before serious escalation. Yeah, so if you do the Slido, we can, where is the, yeah. So what we're thinking about here is, could the algorithmic system here harmfully discriminate against any service user?
It's to what extent?
Yeah. And maybe if you've done the slider, if you put in a couple of things around why it could potentially discriminate or cause, harmfully discriminate. Yeah, so we're starting to see the consensus is very much to a great extent. Someone has just said the potential for abuse is very high. So one of the things they say in this, the police say, is that they've taken out ethnicity and geography from the data that's being used to create the tool. However, people may now be aware that discrimination or harmful discrimination and profiling doesn't just happen from using indicators in the data that are related to certain variables or certain protected variables. There's a number of ways this can happen. So a really, really significant way is that there's a thing called proxy variables. For example, if you have someone's socioeconomic status, etc., that can correlate with other issues, with other features like race or gender, for example. Another is, we know that there's a feedback loop when it comes to policing. Certain groups and areas are significantly over-policed, so that means they'll be reflected more in the relevant police database, such as Q Prime. So when you're analyzing the data, you're going to have over-visibility of those groups that have already been included in the database. And once police go knocking on doors, they will also inevitably pick up other offences or other minor aggressions, etc. It could cause aggression, which means there's a feedback loop whereby they get recorded again into the database. And this can continue, something like this. And especially when you think about First Nations peoples and the mistrust that exists of police, having police officers knock on your door may not actually help de-escalate a situation very much. So we need to think about, these sort of dynamics in these cases. I'm just going to look at the chat quickly. So I think people have touched on the risk of escalation, TV dynamics, reinforcing bias. Yes, so there's some really helpful comments there. Paul, if we go to the next one. So this is the final case study. So this is a trial by Services Australia to use machine learning to detect potential identity theft of Centrelink customers to stop payment rerouting. So they want to see whether the people making the application for Centrelink are who they say they are, or they want to proactively look through data that already exists to identify cases of fraud using machine learning. So if we go to the question here, so to what extent does the service user have an informed choice about when their personal information is accessed or shared? If we go to the Slido. Okay, so looks like most people have said to some extent or not at all. So in this case, that would be sort of generally accurate because A, when it comes to something like Centrelink, many people are reliant on that for their, as we've seen with Robodet, the use of algorithms in Centrelink service delivery can be really, really challenging and lead to potentially harmful consequences. So when it comes to something like welfare that people cannot live without often, having meaningful and informed choice is something that can be really difficult to provide, firstly. Secondly, the way the technology is actually designed is that the data is analyzed before any contact is made, because the system is being deployed in a general inherent environment of mistrust and suspicion. When you're looking for people that are fraudulent, naturally what it's going to lead to is that you're not going to share that much information with them, because you are just treating people with suspicion, which is something we know is embedded very much in welfare systems and welfare rhetoric. And in this case, okay, I'm just going to have a look at the chat quickly. Yeah, need to consent, indicators of fraud. Yeah, so some of the things that people have mentioned. Okay, so we won't have time to go into depth on this one, but we can move on. Paul?
Okay, so thank you, Silverdeep, for going through all those, and thank you all for the comments that you made. Are really insightful. I think the what we are trying to highlight with these discussions is sometimes it needs that organisation to talk to each other to say, well, why did you answer this question this way, and why did you answer this question in that way? And that helps to have better shared understanding within an organisation, but also helps to say, actually, well, what can we do to actually improve that situation? So that's what we're trying to do and stimulate with this tool within organisations. So, Vis, were you going to share the screen and explain briefly how the results look, and the saving and the file upload, and then we can have feedback and conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you're done filling out the toolkit, it'll kind of look something similar to this, where you've got the traffic light responses throughout your assessment. With the results, the way that this is structured is to, again, give you different opportunities to reflect upon your responses. So at the top here, you've got a summary. It's giving you a count of how many questions have you responded to. It'll give you a distribution of the different responses as well. And then down here, you can actually click on a certain segment to revisit what were the questions that you actually filled out. So again, the idea is to give you multiple opportunities to just make sense of what your initial take on the response was. And you get the same exact features here that if you wanted to add in more data, you could, or if you wanted to resolve a particular response. It's organized by both principles and domains. And then if you've got unresponded questions, or if you've marked something that needs to be revisited, you can do that in this interface as well. So that's the basic results. With your next step section, this is again meant to give you another opportunity to look at all of the content that you put into the question with regards to any actions. So for instance, if you put in an action plan, that will sort of be added in here. So you can sort of read that action statement here. It'll also it'll give you a reference point to the question that you looked at. You also have the opportunity to filter questions based on particular domains, as well as based on certain principles. So depending on how you want to interact with the toolkit, you've got a couple of different ways to do this. Another aspect here is you've got a very simplified view where you can sort of put in a project owner. So let's say you want to say manager, and that'll be added in. And you can also add in notes if you wanted to use this as a space to give yourself further inputs or commentary around whatever the action is. We've also created another way of sort of looking at the action. And again, we're very open to feedback here. So whether it's sort of looking at frequency scale, so is it a large scale problem? Is it going to happen fairly frequently? Do we want to sort of, is the severity large? So it's sort of giving you, again, another way of mapping out whatever the problem area is that you're identifying. And just in terms of file management, so over here, you'll notice that when I go to my folder, at the moment, it's linked to a particular file, and that's where my data is being stored. Just a point, the reason why this is a desktop app is that the storage is happening on your device and on your through your browser's directory, and you can export a file. And so when you click export, based on whatever you're responding to, you have the option to select all, or if you just wanted to select a particular section, you could save that and hit export, and then it'll ask you where do you want to export this. The files for this are stored as JSON files. So this might be familiar to anyone who's done any form of computer programming. Don't necessarily need to know more about it, but you can save it in your file directory, and then the same sort of concept appears when you want to import data. So you can, again, go here and hit import, and let's say I'm going to hit import. So when I hit import to a file, it gives me the option to sort of review what my previous question was or previous response to the question and what the new one is. And then I can actually go through it one by one to work out whether I want the new responses or the previous ones. And so that's one form of ways in which you can sort of socialize the toolkit. And collaborate on it. Another way of doing this is if you're storing the file on, let's say, your organization's shared directory. So if it's on OneDrive or if it's on a SharePoint space where multiple people can access the same file, then you can also collaborate on it. So yeah, that's just a bit of an overview of the results in next sections.
Thanks, Avis. And so the other thing is, like with the sharing, is if you would want to share the TIAKIT around to different sections of the organisation. So you want the IT people to do the kind of the IT questions. You can say, here's what we've done. Can you upload our questions, add your questions to your answers to this? And then, so that's the way in which we've designed it. So that is. Thank you very much, everyone, for contributing. We want to hand over to you to ask questions of us. You now have access to the TIAKIT. You can then use it within your organisations, but we are also very happy to come to your organisations and work with you to get it socialised within your organisation. We are very keen to have any feedback about how you used it. Any insights about what that has done for you and your organizations or what you've learned, because we're also trying to conduct research about what does this toolkit do. So I'm now open to questions. Anyone of the team, please feel free to answer, or put your hand up, please, if you've got some questions.
I'll jump in here, Paul, and share some of the questions. But before we get to the chat, questions in the chat and others that might come, so it's okay for people to contact you on the email that we've shared in the chat, the tiakit@uq.edu.au, and discuss with the team how they might, take their first steps in terms of embedding this in an organisation.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess the key thing is not to think about TIAKIT as an evaluation of the whole organization's use of technology, but is of a particular tool that you're planning on you're concerned about or wanting to reflect on. The critical capability question, critical consideration questions are the place to start with, because some people might say we don't have enough time to go through 70 questions.
Thank you. We've got a question here from Madeline. As a not computer programmer, can you tell me where I can view the JSON file offline? For example, does it convert to a CSV?
Yeah, I was just going to respond to that. So I might just share my screen again. So thank you for that question. So with the JSON file, that's basically being used to power the interface, so to speak. But if you want to export it for viewing on, let's say, as a spreadsheet, you can go to your next step section and hit export. And then that'll open up, give you the option to sort of export as a Excel file. And so then you can sort of view it in an Excel format. However, for the purpose of the tool, you can't exactly import an Excel sheet. You'll need to make all the changes here in the interface. And with the JSON file, there are ways to convert it into different formats, but it might not be as sensible yet. So yeah, I think if you wanted to just sort of review your responses or just, annotate them in a spreadsheet format and integrate that into your workflow, you could use the export function here.
I see you've already answered this one, but Penny has asked, are there any tips for which questions work better for certain types of AI? And Subradip has said, we have questions that are tailored to specific types of AI systems, e.g. chatbots, risk assessment, etc. So when you select the type of system that is being used, these options become available. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Subradip or the team?
Aviz, do you mind just going into the toolkit and just showing them how you'd go about selecting the type of AI and the guidance that's there?
Yep, absolutely. All right, so there are a couple of different ways to do this. First one would be in your organizational context. This would be the third block where you can select or deselect these algorithm systems. If for argument's sake, as your another way of doing it is you go to your assessments page and right at the end of this, so over here, you've got the ability to show or hide sections that are the algorithm specific ones. Yeah, so it's both in your assessment right at the end, or it's the third tab on your algorithm types. Does that clarify that question, Penny?
I think a key thing to add is that the questions for the chatbot or the risk assessment tool are in addition to the other questions. So it's designed so that all of the other questions are for any form of automation or tool in a service delivery context. And they're the specific tools, they have additional questions on top of that. People may choose to focus on beyond the critical capabilities to look at the specific of those 4 domains: the algorithmic system, the interaction with the human, the service user engagement, or the processes and procedures, if they think they are the ones that are really important, if they choose to.
We have another question here from Madeline. Thank you, Madeline. Would your questions apply to website or app design, or do you know of a more applicable tool for this assessment?
Yes, certainly. Wes, do you want to answer? Yeah.
So I was just going to say, Madeline, that I think the questions are designed in a way that they can apply to any form of technology-enabled system, predominantly focusing on AI integrations. So I think the short answer is yes. With web design, for instance, there might be certain other parameters that you might be looking for in terms of, let's say, consistency. So the fact that I've got a nav bar here on the left-hand side is something that's slightly familiar when it comes to app design interface elements. And for instance, even having things like multiple ways in which to sort of navigate and see how many questions you've responded to, tally type things, they're also sort of drawing on web design principles. However, the overarching things like, can you interact with a human? Can you provide feedback to about the website? Those are things that you would integrate as features. So I think, yes, it definitely applies. But if you wanted to sort of think about ways in which you can make good websites, then there are sorts of frameworks. Yeah. So Rudolf, did you want to add to that? Sorry, you muted.
I want to mute. Yeah, that's good. I've just answered, and Paul has as well, one of the other questions. So the question was, do you use TIAKIT after you've already got a tool, or to determine one to use, or both? So the toolkit has been designed so that it can be used either pre-planning, during planning, or during deployment, or afterwards as well. It's meant to be sort of a process that you keep coming back to rather than a one-time compliance checklist. Yeah, so if that answers the question, yeah. Anything? Lyndall, do you have anything to add to any of these?
You guys have been doing fabulously. I'm just really pleased at how the questions from the audience are showing that they're thinking about the interaction between AI systems and its impact on service users and their well-being. And I'm delighted at the nature of the questions and the comments as well, particularly looking at sort of specific needs of service users and different the different experiences of different service users. I'm really pleased. Thank you.
I have a question. So what, and you've probably spoken to this throughout to some degree, but what role do you think the TIAKIT could play in AI governance within an organisation?
We've actually got, it's interesting you mentioned that. We presented this at an earlier workshop, and some team members from that organization's governance team looked at this toolkit as a way of approaching their own, like auditing their entire service delivery around AI enabled or supported tools. So I think there definitely are ways in which you can operationalize this for governance purposes. But again, at the core of it, it's meant to be a tool that helps provoke you to think about the users and, in a trauma-informed way. How you use it and whether it's it has utility as a governance tool, I think that's really up to the users of this system. But it's been designed in a way that it's trying to be as dialogic, as inclusive, as provocative as possible without necessarily constraining the use cases. So if it works as a governance tool, I think that'd be really fantastic to hear about.
Thank you. Yes, we've got another question here. Would you recommend using the TIAKIT for a reflective process every 6 months-ish, or would you suggest that it is particular for different tools or organizational context?
I would say the key thing is, are there changes that are happening? So, well, are you changing the way in which the tool is being used within an organization, or like for example, Tessa, whether you're turning off the option to talk to a human. If you're making those decisions, that's not necessarily about the technology, it's about what you've wrapped around the organization. But similarly, if you're thinking about the technology's changed or changing the technology, that might be the cases when you do. With regards to governance, the whole point, I guess, is it's really to prompt reflection on really core elements around ways in which technology delivered services operate within organizations, and so it can prompt those bigger questions. We do have, obviously, we've created this TIAKIT as a way in which to summarize and record questions and then allow people to see it. But we have played with or experimented with other forms. So we have had a more of a gamified version where we've actually had this on big A1 sheets, and people went through the questions like a roll the dice game. We can also generate cards that like a playing cards where you actually a bit like a discussion starter thing. So there are different ways if organizations would like to explore different ways in which to get those conversations happening, use these tools as prompts for those conversations.
Thank you, Paul. We often, I'm often hearing from organisations that they don't know where to start, or their board doesn't know where to start with regard to their position regarding use of AI tools. So some are saying, we're just saying no for the time being. It strikes me that this could be a very good place to start. What we recommend to organisations is that they engage fully and create an AI policy as a starting point. But this seems like a very good tool, as you say, to start those conversations and to assist people on a bit of a journey around the kinds of things they need to be thinking about regarding the cohort that they may be supplying services to. So would you think it's a good second step, if you like?
Totally. I think the 10 critical considerations is always the good place to start. Can be overwhelming, and those 10 critical considerations have been identified through our co-design workshops with human service providers to say, actually, we think these are the ones that are core and people should start with. And if you have to do only 10, these are the 10 we should suggest you do. But that allows people to then go, oh, okay, well, maybe we need to do more, or no, we're happy with that. These highlight some areas we need to work on, for example.
Great, thank you. Sibel has asked, do you know of a tool to use, assess, benchmark the use of AI by other organisations or public entities that could inform advocacy for improved human service delivery and accountability?
So I've just answered in the chat. Thanks for the question. I have linked to one in the US, one in New South Wales, and one in Canada. They are for assessing. The US one is general, and the New South Wales and Canada ones are for government use of AI. There are other ones that have come up, but those are some of the original ones that were actually made. They were more pioneering ones. But since then, others have come up. But I'll just giving a few quick examples.
Thank you, Sabrina.
The Queensland government has one as well, which has been engaged with by the Queensland Audit Office as well. I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you, Paul. And I've seen a couple of comments from people loving the cards idea, and having been a provider in a former life, I can see that being a really good tool to start conversations in different settings. Somebody has asked, are those cards available? I know you said you played around with them.
So we've got a couple of different versions of interactive tool variants of the toolkit for design, particularly for workshops. We have not necessarily published those as yet, but we can work towards making those available if there's interest. So yeah, we can definitely get that to you.
And we can do cards both virtual and physical.
Oh, that's good. That's great. So with regard to that, you've been using those types of resources, have you, when you do workshops with organisations? Is that right or no?
Yeah.
You have.
Used, yeah. And I think I guess we've been thinking of ways in which we can make TIAKIT as available and scalable as possible. Therefore, we've got the different variants. So for in-person workshops where we have that as an opportunity, we do have the more interactive versions of it that are more hands-on. But I think the idea is to use that as a stepping stone to actually get into the toolkit. That's the one that we've shared today. So that, you know, once you understand the utility, or if you see utility in the toolkit, then you can migrate to the actual digital version. Survitip, you're muted.
I just wanted to make a quick point. I know we're at time, but I just wanted to say that I know people can often feel like AI is this magical, mystical, nebulous thing. But actually what we've learned from this is that people have a lot of expertise in AI, and AI expertise doesn't have to look like technical expertise. And everyone should be confident that what they know and what they understand is actually a lot of the problems that arise with AI. It's not just problems with coding and data. It's actually these really social technical problems. So I think a big part of the tool is actually building confidence amongst service providers and help them understand that they know more probably than they think they do. So I think that's something to take away as well.
Thank you, Severdip. I think that's really important because there's certainly in the community services sector, and what I'm hearing is there is that lack of confidence because people do see it as a technical issue that is sometimes beyond people's literacy. However, you're right, you know, what the community sector do have is an expertise in thinking through the kind of risks to the people they provide services to, and often their staff. So I think that's a great reminder, you know, for people to know your expertise partnered with the TIAKIT could bring about some really, generate some really interesting and good results. Are there any more final questions or points? As we mentioned before, if you would like to follow up with the team, they have the, if you could pop your email address again into the chat, that would be great. And you welcome people, providers connecting with you to have further discussion about the TIAKIT. I'd like to thank the research team for joining us today, for offering these insights into the TIAKIT. I'm really excited about its use in the community services sector. I've looked through the TIAKIT myself and reflected from the perspective of delivering service to, in my former work, to adults with intellectual and cognitive disability, and the kinds of provocations that are included in critical questions are so important and applicable in that space. So so thank you, Paul, Viz, Lyndall, and Supradev, for your generosity today in sharing, and just reminding people again that the recording will be available to you in a post email, and also the PowerPoint presentation that's been offered. And I'll note the links that have been shared today by the team in the meeting minutes. So there won't be meeting minutes of the actual session because you've got the recording, but I will separate out the links for you so you've got them handy. So yeah, please, most people have been joining in the chat and thanking the team. So thank you once again.
Just one other thing that I wanted to highlight, I don't know if we mentioned this, Paul, but there is a research component to this work as well. So if anyone wants to use TIAKIT and then have more feedback workshops with us and give us advice in terms of how we can improve it or how we can tailor it, that would be fantastic as well. So feel free to reach out, and looking forward to improving this.
Thank you for mentioning that, Viz. And I'll also attach to the minutes the one-pager on the TIAKIT that you have developed, so people have a note about that opportunity to engage in the research with you. And so they've got that information. Thank you.